She'd made it only partway up the steps when a wiry hand clamped around her wrist. "Would you like to dance?" Reese spun around, knowing who'd asked before even seeing the man. She forced a polite smile as her fears were confirmed. It was him, the man who'd burned holes straight through her body with a steely glare alone. He was fairly thin, but his features were soft and round, from the outline of his clean-shaven jaw to his small nose and bulbous cheeks. He blinked a few times, his bright green eyes watering from the blaring stage lights. "I'd love to," she lied, guessing the makeup would have to wait. Her peace of mind would be put on hold too, but it was just one dance. She could get through it. His clammy fingers skidded down her wrist to where he took hold of her hand, pulling her deep into the crowd before settling on a spot. She furrowed her brows as she looked at him further, unable to get past the odd shifting of his eyes, the strange way he evaded her gaze. He was simply shy, Reese decided, as he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around her back. She rested her hands on his shoulders in return, unnerved by his tense and rigid form. Her skin objected to him, too. The very feel of him against her was all wrong. There was an obvious rhythm to the slow song playing, but the guy barely lifted a foot. Reese had danced with several men that evening, everything from true Texas gentlemen to cocky bull-riding brutes. But none of them had made her feel the way this guy did. On edge. Almost afraid. She pulled in a deep breath, counting down the seconds, dying for the song to end. She felt guilty for being so turned off by the man. He was obviously nervous. Most likely he'd simply been working up the nerve to ask her to dance as he'd stared throughout the night. Why couldn't she be endeared to him instead? The answer stood in the energy surrounding him. It felt off, eager, intense. And as much as she wanted to make polite conversation to ease the discomfort of it all, she couldn't think of a word to say. He'd just have to be the one to speak up first. Yet as the band played on, the odd stranger never uttered a word. And as ugly as it felt, staying silent as they danced, Reese did just that. At last, the music began to fade as a deep voice blared from the stage. Corbin Carmichael, the host of the annual event.
"One last song, folks,"
he announced.
"and then our Pearl and Rose and our new title holder will take the stage for the passing of the crown."
Hoots, hollers, and catcalls sounded from the crowd.
"Now let's hear one more round of applause for our rip-roaring band for the night, the Texan Blasters. I want to see all y'all on the dance floor for this one. Time to get those boots a-stomping."
Reese cleared her throat and backed away from the awkward man, causing him to drop his arms at last. "Thanks for the dance," she said, turning away from him. She was anxious to be free from the man, to find her mom, and to get freshened up before passing on her crown. It was that tight and sudden grip around her wrist that stopped her short, a repeat of what he'd done the first time. His palm felt cool and wet. "Guess it's time to finally give up your title," the young man said. "I'm really gonna miss seeing you in that crown." Reese's gaze had been set on the grip he had on her. She glanced over to the bodies stepping to the line dance before looking into the man's face. Beads of sweat coated his forehead and upper lip. The surface of his cheeks looked red and swollen. "I hardly ever wore the thing," she said. "You wore it to all your public appearances." His fingers loosened the slightest bit. The corner of his lip twitched. Reese nodded, his intrusive gaze causing her to shift, the striking green of his eyes becoming oddly familiar. "Do I know you from somewhere?" she asked. "High school," he explained. "I'm Donald Turnsborough. We were in Mr. Lee's biology class together." "That's right," she said, only she couldn't actually place him. It had been 5 years since high school, after all. The crowd started to move in on them, forcing their bodies close once more. "Well, thanks again for the dance," Reese said. "I better go freshen up." She darted toward the stage, barely dodging a collision with the dancers on the floor. She folded her arms over her chest as she sped up the stairs, recalling the way he'd reached for her wrist, the recollection making her shiver. Feeling a bit more at ease, Reese sped toward the restrooms behind the stage. She gripped hold of the thick black curtain along the side wall, knowing the bathroom doors were entirely hidden by the thing, and spotted a man among the hefty cloth. Her heart jumped. She tilted her head, anxious to get a better look at his face, when he disappeared into the fabric folds. With renewed force, Reese shoved the curtain aside once more, wondering if her mind was playing tricks on her. She might not have gotten a solid look at him, but the man she'd seen looked just like Donald Turnsborough. She was sure of it. Her hands trembled slightly as she tugged the curtain back one last time, knowing she was in the right place. And there it was, the sign she'd been looking for. The letters carved right into the bathroom door. Señoritas. Anxious thumps pressed their way through her chest as she pried open the heavy oak door, desperate to get into the quiet space and grip hold of her rampant thoughts. The music died down as the door closed behind her, the soft glow of light a welcoming change. She skipped the mirror altogether and sped straight for the only stall. Reese had the door partway closed before she noticed a young woman standing at the sink. She tilted her head to catch eye contact with her through the mirror. Blonde hair, a sash over her shoulder, and a dress that matched the color of Reese's gown. "Howdy," Reese offered with a shaky voice. The girl blinked her lashes through a wand of mascara before glancing at her. "Can't wait to get my hands on that crown," she said. "Are you sad about giving it up?" Reese shook her head. "Only a little. I mean, it's been a great year, and you're going to enjoy every minute of it, I'm sure. But I think I'm ready to be done with it and move on, you know?" The girl reached into her makeup bag before twisting a small lid off a tube of lip gloss. She smothered it over her top lip as she spoke. "I don't know," she said, moving to the bottom lip. "I'm not going to stop here. I plan to go on to Brazoria County, Miss Texas, Miss America. I want it all." Reese smiled, charmed by the young woman's ambition. There was quite a difference in their ages. Perlin's new rose had won at the young age of 18, while Reese had taken the crown at the maximum age of 23. "Well, good for you. I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines," she said before closing the stall door. The latch to lock the metal door was old and rusty, nearly impossible to slide. She tightened her grip around the dull knob and shoved, the loud pop filling the quiet space. "Sorry," Reese said. "Stubborn lock." Her gaze fell to the small tiles on the floor as she folded her arms over her chest, wishing she could skip the ceremony altogether, slip out the back door, and go home. Her interaction with the man on the dance floor had her feeling nervous. Afraid, though she knew it was foolish. The guy couldn't possibly mean her harm. He'd only been awkward, was all, not dangerous. She nodded to herself, convinced to shake it off. With a wave of assurance urging her forward, Reese reached for the latch to unlock the stall. Just as she shoved the stubborn thing into place, an ear-splitting explosion rocked the room. Reese pressed her hands to her ears and ducked down, cringing as the deafening blast echoed throughout the small space. A gunshot? Had somebody just shot a gun? Her heart thudded against her chest, the pressing rhythm making it hard to breathe. A sharp ringing pierced her ears as she lifted her chin and then straightened to a stand altogether. Through the crack of the stall frame, a view of the mirror came into sight. Only she didn't see the girl. Instead, Reese saw a man reflected there, his green eyes wild. And then he was gone, lost in the black fabric folds. The door creaked to a close, the shrill ringing only intensified as she yanked open the flimsy stall door. Blood. A dark oozing pool of it soaked the satin banner across the young girl's chest. A hand flew to Reese's mouth as she screamed, a horrid realization coming to mind. The man in the mirror. It had been him. The one who'd sent her rushing to the restroom in fear. He was dangerous after all. And though it hurt to think it, Reese was certain the bullet in the girl's chest had been meant for her.